Hey folks, thanks very much for joining our Monday Mindshare again. And Jazz, has been taken actually probably me months to get hold of this guy, but we've been jazzed to finally get him on Monday Mindshare. He's been traveling the world and racing the world. Welcome to our show, Christian. It's awesome to have you.
Yeah, thank you. No, pleased to be on.
Yeah, well, it's hard to keep up with you both on the course and just frankly in life. But finally, we've caught up. Tell me where in the world are you dialing in from?
Yeah, so right now, Vitoria Gasteiz, which is northern Spain,
Okay.
sort of an hour from the coastline. So, yeah, come and gone from there. But yeah, for the last few months, this has sort of been my home, really. So, yeah, finally good to lock down a time.
Bit of a training mecca. It feels like that whole area, right? Just tons of athletes seem to be basing themselves out of there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure. I suppose, I haven't been to some of the other spots, all of
Yeah,
which look just as good, to be honest.
yeah.
I think it just depends on, which coaching group you're in or which races you want to be closer to and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's pretty spectacular part of the world. I mean, coming from New Zealand, you get good training locations and stuff,
Right.
but it's been pretty surreal.
Well, you're right. I mean, New Zealand's not a shabby place itself for some magic scenery and great training, but
Mm,
I mean, obviously, up in that part of the world, racing's intense. So I'm sure that's what you're trying to get your teeth into, and we'll get into that.
mm.
But maybe just for everyone's benefit, if you can't tell already, Christian's from New Zealand. Another one of the what is it about New Zealand that is generating so many good athletes in the triathlon endurance scene? What's in the water down there? You think?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I think, there's always, when there's someone at the top racing, everyone's sort of looking up to them. But I suppose in any sport in New Zealand, we always, do pretty well for a small country. But I think it is that sporting culture in New Zealand is just quite prominent. And, whether it's, rugby, which is the classic sport, but yeah, the individual sports seem to be pretty good there as well. I suppose maybe it's the weather or just the small nature of it. We feel like we've got to push pretty hard. So maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, who knows?
Well, yeah, and folks, Christian's actively on the WTC World Triathlon circuits racing around the world, and we'll get into some of that racing and some of the results recently at the Worlds in Hamburg. But maybe just stepping back, Christian, like before triathlon, both sport, like what sports as a kid were you? Are you still a kid? But what when you were a really young kid? What was it? Was it rugby and cricket and everything else we typically do in that part of the world?
Yeah, honestly, everything. Anything to start with, anything with a ball, any ball sports was where I was at. Yeah, I'd get stuck into anything. Towards the end, it was sort of just rugby, cricket, and tennis. That were my main ones. And then as you get older and older, every sport wants you to be there more and more. So it
Right.
slowly gets funneled out. But yeah, I was just a lover for sport. And you just get stuck in school and then take it outside of there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just whatever I get my hands into, really.
So you're 25, 26 thereabouts at the moment.
Mhm.
I mean, some athletes, of course, come effectively straight out of school almost and go into, let's just say, pre-professional, and then not long after that,
Mhm.
professional. For you, you went and studied for a while first. Just take us through kind of, what you were studying, and then what was it that kind of got you thinking, hey, I want to have a crack at more focused, execution on the sport?
Yeah, I think it was always I always sort of had a rough plan that I wanted to sort of move through, and I think getting sort of an education to start with was I was always told, you've got to make sure you've got something else in the background. So um, I had an opportunity to go and study full time at Massey in Palmy, and I studied resource and environmental planning,
Huh.
which is a 4-year degree, so good chunk of time. And I sort of always had the plan, keep building my sport throughout that time and doing what I can while studying full time, and then get some work experience, do some full time work, and then slowly go to part time. And then
Right.
at the moment, the first time I've got a chance to experience what it's like to be a pro triathlete, really. So just
Yeah.
sort of taking a step back from work and giving it a good crack. So yeah, I suppose it's always been that plan, but it's just I didn't crack into sort of professional lifestyle of sport until a little bit later on, I suppose.
What observations, like what is it now? How long has it been? 12 months or a bit more than that, I guess. Like what are the obvious ahas when you jump into this feet first?
Yeah, I think it's just having the time. The main thing is the quality of the things you can do, how you execute everything really. When you're working, it often feels like your day is just trying to just get everything done and tick it off. You're just
Right.
going from one thing to the next.
Yeah.
Whereas, what I noticed from going to part-time work and then in the last few months to no work is your day is centered around your training, and then you can hit everything with a bit more quality. You can move things around the day depending on if it's weather or how you're feeling, rather than just being locked into that one time. So I think that's the first realization was like, this training literally is at the center, and yeah, you notice those differences pretty fast.
Yeah, I bet. I can't imagine going from just professional life with emails coming in left, right, and center to training being the center of it all. But I would have thought with your environmental planning that you look at some of these, particularly in Europe, actually, some of these courses through these towns, they're pretty tight bike courses. I imagine you can kind of put your hand to some of the planning to help out there.
Yeah, it is funny. You have a different perspective. Coming over here it's my first time in Europe actually. So coming over here, you look at it sort of as a training environment, but also as the town planning lens as well. You put on and
Right.
but I suppose you do look at these towns and they've been there
Yeah,
for
old,
years
right?
and years and years. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's right. But in saying that, you look at some of them and they're well ahead of their time. And places like Auckland, New Zealand, it's planning's not hasn't been great there. So yeah, it's funny looking at it that way.
So let's talk about the first triathlon you did first, and then we'll creep forward, if you will, into
Mm,
I was looking at on the WTC your athlete history, your racing history, I should say. But
mm.
before obviously it was up there on World Triathlon. What was the first race that you put your name down and towed the line for?
Yeah, early on, I was just a runner and a cyclist. My old man's was a cyclist, and my older brother was a pretty top triathlete as well.
Okay.
So early days, it was just racing, cycling in schools, and a bit of track cycling, and then athletics and cross country. And that first brought me into duathlon, which is run, bike, run. So I used to compete in those to start with to get my sort of foot into that sort of endurance sort of multi-sport racing.
Right.
And then I quickly realized that triathlon was where it was at, and a lot more interesting and challenging, and also just the bigger sort of on the world stage. So started picking up swimming, or a bit later than everyone else, which has proved to be a big part of where I'm at now.
But I
So
was looking at,
yeah,
we'll get onto this in more detail. I
mm,
was looking at your Hamburg race and your swim. If you look at the top 10, there was only one guy that was faster. So you've obviously come
yeah,
along. I don't know where you were at the start, but you're clearly at the
mm.
top of the class at the moment.
It's getting there. Yeah. So the Hamburg was age group world. So the elite stuff, the swim is just that much quicker. And it's effectively it's pretty much how the race plans out is after we come out of the
Right.
swim. There are some races where that can change, but if you miss the big bike packs out of the water, then it's pretty hard to catch up from there. So definitely my swim has come a long way, and it continuing to work on that. And it's sort of the last thing holding me back from really making the big jump. So yeah, I'm hoping it's not going to be too much longer.
Well, it's been a busy year. I'm just looking here at some of the racing, Oceania racing, and then obviously Africa, and then recently Hamburg. And if I'm reading this right, you're eyeing off. Is it back in Africa? There's some more racing back that way.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, on the 3rd of September, I race in Tunisia, and probably on my way back to New Zealand. Um, and these African races have been sort of a good step into that racing. Just the fields aren't quite as strong as some of these European races. To me, being a slightly weaker swimmer gives me a bit more of an opportunity As well, while we've been over here, we've been racing a lot of the local Basque races.
Yeah.
And here in Spain, there's such a depth of athletes, and those races have been, you learn just as much from them, and the
Yeah.
crowds are probably bigger. There's probably more hype around them. Prize money online and that sort of thing. So, there's all sorts of people showing up, which has made things pretty interesting as well.
I bet it has. And
Mm.
we'll jump into, training and just over these years, like what's been like the key big levers that you've been working on. But let's stay for a moment on the Hamburg race.
Mm.
8th place, you must be just jazzed about, coming over to Europe effectively your first year and placing so well in that first race. I see one of your compatriots there were in the was on the podium, which is always encouraging, right? But again, looking at the times and just to give context, I mean, a lot of obviously at SFuels, there's ultra running. These are 20-hour races. Then you have the Ironmans, of course, which is 7 to 15 hours. And I look at this race, it's all over in an hour that you're talking about. And if I look at the top, like where you finished in 8th, there's only 1 minute between you and the guy that came first. So it's all pretty tight and tense. I mean, how do you navigate that? These are tight courses and you got 8-10 people side by side right up to the finish line. How does that play out, particularly on the bike?
Yeah, and for us, the cycling, you can draft, so you're in bike groups. I mean, yeah, it literally is that. It's very fast racing, and a lot of it, if you put yourself in a good position out of the water, a lot of it's then decided on the run. For me, I mean, I was happy with 8th. It was a good day, but also I didn't run to where I thought I could have. I also had sort of raced probably maybe the 8 weekends prior to that, so lots and lots of racing. So by all means, I wasn't fresh, but I put myself in a good position going on to that run, and yeah, was right at the pointy end for the first few K, and unfortunately got a bit of stitch that day, which was just from the fatigue from all the racing. But it's pretty exciting, and to be honest, you do get used to it. It's just sort of the environment you just become accustomed to, and you just got to learn just to hold on in those moments and do what you can.
Well, it's funny, this summer we were over in your part of the world. We had some time to watch some of the Tour de France, and just like the latter part of the race, on just seeing how close athletes are. I don't mean just in proximity from a time perspective, but shoulders and elbows and hands, right to the finish line. It's really tense. It's great. Obviously spectator sport. I did want to ask you about the run at Hamburg. When I think about some of the other athletes that we've been working with, the absolute world class in Zach Bitter, and obviously Hayden's times on the run is just world class, even on a raw track in terms of performance in athletics. You mentioned cross country earlier. Did you spend any time on the track before triathlon? Were you an 800 or a mile guy at all?
No, not too well. Just like school athletics and stuff like that. But I hadn't spent too much time on the track. We'd always, do some key sessions on the track and time trials or the odd track race. But it is something that I'll look to get my hands, into this coming summer in New Zealand. Do a bit of track racing. For me, like I know I've got a lot more to give in the run, but while I've been working really hard on my swim, I've sort of just kept it ticking over, slowly built it, but I haven't been able to put too much focus into it yet. So I know that I have some more to give there, which is always good. But for me, it's just prioritizing putting myself in that position before then, trying to execute that a bit better. So, but yeah, definitely cross country. I always get stuck into that if I can, because it's fun racing. It's just something different, and yeah.
I grew up in cross country too, and it's just an awesome sport as a young kid. I loved it. I'd still do it if I could. I love the trail running. It's just a little slower now, so it's good for my age. But really, again, looking at that Hamburg data and those top 10 athletes, it was really the run where it spread that top 10. It looks like on the numbers that effectively you were all there at T2 pretty much. And this guy that comes in first at 15:57, I mean, it's a tidy. I'm assuming it's a 5K flat Yeah, so it's a tidy 5K, even if you just
Mm.
run it by itself. So it's a fast time, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's talk about training over the years. I mean, you mentioned about your swimming focus and development. What else? I mean, you mentioned a little bit about biking. Talk us to a little bit more about cycling. Kind of what are the big levers that you've been working with to improve as you've kind of gone from age grouper to more professional approach to the sport?
Yeah, I suppose, I've been through a few different coaches throughout sort of the last few years, and everyone looks at things quite differently. And then
Yeah,
again, working with a few different coaches here in Victoria. Yeah, I suppose everyone has their little sort of things that they believe is their recipe, but the fundamentals are all quite simple, really, quite the same, and just trying to be consistent. And I think over the years that consistency is something that I've sort of, I could have done a bit more. It sort of let me down a little bit more, just being a bit busier with different things. I think when you start training more as a professional, you can get that consistency in a lot more. I think some of the, I grew quite tall and sort of thinned out a little bit in my teenage years, and strength was always something that I sort of tried to work on, and that means a little bit of time in the gym and just sort of building a bit more of an aerobic base. So I think I didn't have as much strength as a lot of guys early on, so you have to spend a bit more time doing that. But I think now, once you sort of build that base, you can start building the speed into it and tapping into that side of things. I think being in New Zealand, you often just peak for the summer of racing. Whereas now, if we come from between summer and summer,
yeah,
back in New Zealand to over in the European summer, you start doing a lot more fast sort of speed work, a lot more racing, and it means you've got to stay pretty quick for the whole
yeah,
year, which
yeah.
can have its difficulties.
Right.
So yeah, I think just keep trying to keep trying to build my base and tap into that speed, and you start to get over here and you realize just how quick you need to be. So yeah, you've really got to develop that.
Whole new level. So what kind of
Yeah.
volume, like, would you say from pre-pro to now more pro lifestyle, both in hours and just stay on the bike
Mm.
for a second, what kind of mileage for a sprint distance triathlon, Olympic distance?
Yeah, I suppose a total sort of volume each week. I used to do maybe 18 hours a week across the three disciplines.
Yeah,
Now, since being over here, I'm up around 25 hours a week.
yeah,
And yeah, on the bike, it varies depending on time of the year and how
yeah,
much
right.
sort of time we're putting into that discipline. But over here we've been doing sort of 300-400K weeks on the bike, split between aerobic easy rides, hill reps, or little technical sort of surgy car park sessions and that sort of thing. So
Huh, huh.
some good variation in there. Yeah.
Yeah. What like at this point in the season where you're going from, in fact, literally world championship racing to still world-class racing, how much time are you still spending in zone two aerobic, mileage?
Yeah, still a lot. But
Yeah.
it's a endurance sport at the end of the day.
Right.
Yeah, as you say, we only race for an hour or even less sometimes. But you've still got to build the engine, and then it
Right.
allows you to go back to back with the racing. Over here in the last sort of 12 weeks, I've probably done 10 races. So trying
Yeah.
to build in those aerobic hours within the racing as well. So yeah, still. I wouldn't be able to put a figure to it, but the majority of what we do is aerobic. Yeah,
Yeah. I think it's
yeah.
good for generally the audience, meaning athletes, to hear that. I think there's a lot of misconception that as you turn pro, everything turns high intensity. It's just not the case. I was listening recently to the sports physiologist on UAE Team Emirates, and he was just
Mm,
talking about just the volume that Pogacar's putting in and how much of that is still at zone two. So
mm,
yeah,
mm,
no, it's pretty interesting. Now you mentioned you seem to be, again, I'm going off social media and looking at all the awesome photography and videos that are coming in from your racing everywhere, but you seem to be taller than most. So what is your height?
My height's about 6'1", so I'm about
Okay.
185 or 185 centimeters. Yeah.
Okay. And then you mentioned about spending some time in cycles in the gym and strengthening up. Let's talk a bit about running for a second.
Mm,
It's kind of interesting as you see an athletes evolve from shorter distance sprint and Olympic and then moving across to 70.3s and full distance. It does feel like the bigger frame guys, it's a bit more challenging when they get into the 6'3". I mean, that all said, Frodeno just comes back time and time again and shows how to do it. So
yeah.
what's so far as you just think about, it's always interesting to reflect back even on athletes like Lance. Their physique changed over their career. Obviously for him it was an illness that changed his physique. What's your thoughts in terms of, let's just say, strength but bulk relative to a more slight build for sprint distance? And we can talk about long distance in a second, but how do you feel like the physique needs to be what's right in your mind for sprint Olympic distance racing?
Yeah, it is interesting, and as you say, you see all sorts of shapes and sizes, and there's a guy, Christian Blumenfeld, on the WTS circuit at the moment who looks quite a lot different to everyone else, and then you've got short guys, tall guys, all sorts of things, and then that is benefit in some ways, and then might be harder in other ways. Yeah, I think for me, like I've always been quite tall and skinny, and we can do gym work, but it's pretty hard for us to bulk out.
Right.
With the amount of volume and things we're doing.
Yeah.
I definitely have bulked out a little bit in the upper body over the last few years,
Right.
as my swimming's developed. But you can see strong swimmers that are tiny, and clearly they've just got a really efficient technique. And so I suppose it comes and goes.
No, it is really interesting. I mean, and even the opposite of that, you can see physiques that look like there's no reason why you shouldn't be really good in the water, and it doesn't happen. And I won't call any pros out right now, but there are several that, by all intensive purposes, the mechanics of their physique, they should be pretty solid in the pool. But anyway, no, it's always an interesting aspect of all this. What's as you think about, obviously you're still young in the spirit of the sport, and even thinking about a career in a sport, you're still absolutely at the start of it. But at some point, are you thinking, hey, you evolve from more sprint Olympic into middle race? Now obviously the 100K has become something with PTO, 70.3 is there, and obviously the Ironman. Any thoughts about all that?
For me, at the moment, short distance is definitely where my interest is, and I really enjoy that sort of racing, short, fast, and exciting. Ironmans don't sort of do it for me at the moment. I mean, I obviously I watch it and I love seeing it, all the racing, but I couldn't think of anything worse right now.
They're not done quite at the intensity that you guys do it at.
I mean, as the PTO stuff comes in, it's a bit shorter and sort of allows short distance and long distance athletes to sort of, a bit of a merge there, and everyone can have a crack at it. I'm sure one day I'll give that sort of 70.3 distance a go. But right now my heart's definitely in the short distance stuff, and unless I can never crack the swim, then maybe I'd move up and give it a crack. But I think once I crack that swim, it'll be a good time there in the short stuff.
Sure. What's the dream in terms of during this Olympic sprint time frame, if you will? What's the dream for you?
The dream's always to be on the WTCS circuit at the top end. Just being professional in that side of things, and just being able to just go at it at that level. And then obviously everyone dreams of the Olympics and that kind of thing. And I suppose, you don't realize a lot of these things until you hit certain benchmarks or markers, and then,
Right.
then something else might crop up and you're like, hey, I might have a crack at this, or, that sort of thing. But yeah, for me, just professional triathlete has always been a dream. And so that's, what I'm targeting. Yeah.
That's cool. And we just want to say a big thank you for, representing SFuels. And we're glad that we can have a very small part in your career. And looking forward to working with you on bigger and better things as we go into 23, 24.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's really cool to be a part of, a brand such as SFuels. And I think, in the industry of sports nutrition, there's all sorts out there. There's probably something for everyone to align with and their views and stuff. But SFuels has been great to work with, and I really look forward to what's coming in the future. Yeah.
Well, sure. I mean, we continue to develop, and so do you. So we're looking forward to working more together. Maybe just in finishing up, 2024, are we going to see you back in Europe, or what about the US sometime?
Yeah, for sure. The idea is now is to go between the New Zealand summer and the European summer.
Right.
There's plenty of racing in the US. I think Europe at the moment is where most athletes seem to go, but also I think the longer distance is a bit more suited to the US at the moment, and the shorter stuff maybe in Europe. But wherever the opportunities are, I'll be there.
Cool, buddy. Well, hey, it's awesome to have you here, and thanks for the share on the story. And we're looking forward to keep watching on the racing in September and beyond. And all the best for the finish of 23, and go longer for 24.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's good to be on. And yeah, obviously, I suppose for me, it's kind of the beginning at this point, given, I'm such early days and living that more professional lifestyle. So these next few years will, hopefully have a lot to offer, and which is exciting. So yeah, no, I really look forward to it.
Absolutely. All right, bud. Well, all the best, and we'll catch up with you soon. And we'll be watching at your racing there in Africa. Have a good one.
Yeah, cheers, mate.
Talk soon. Thanks. Bye.